When it comes to anime and manga, it's not something that I'm necessarily the biggest fan of. Though more of a shonen anime type guy, I certainly have expanded into other genres which have interested me on the occasion. Mind you, there's some big shows I just either haven't got to and won't get into, or have gotten into and won't continue. It's not just because of the subject matter, it's the way that it's treated. It's the way that characters are treated due to doing certain things, and if they are treated as comedic or not. There's various problems I have with the medium that comes out from Japan, but for the most part, there are stuff that I'm into. Some of the best don't have weird dumb sex jokes, and if they do, it's like, once ever? Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is one I could really point to as being an anime that doesn't have a weird thing in it. Some of the greatest works of manga or anime have touched these sorts of things, like Devilman, and have done an incredibly great job with it, and one of those cases is of course what we're talking about today. Today we're talking about one of, if not the greatest manga of all time, and even if not the greatest, certainly the most prolific and important, due to the fact that it has influenced everything, whether it comes from other anime and manga, video games of all countries, live-action movies, plays, audio dramas, music, all kinds of art has essentially been inspired by some of the various things made back in the 70s and 80s that really tried to push the boundaries, like Devilman, and of course, Berserk, the brainchild of Kentaro Miura. It's been going for quite a long time and has not come to its conclusion quite yet, due to the fact that the chapters come out maybe every couple of months to like 1 or 2 chapters a year. It's incredibly unclear how far it is in its plotline, though it certainly has been planned out by the initial writer. Of course, it makes sense why these things take so long. Berserk is known for 2 things. Besides its subject matter, it's also because of its art. Its art is some of the most beautiful, astounding creations made by one man, and then later on with a small team, but majorly by one man, that you'll ever see in your life. Saying this panel especially, this awesome 2-pager, one man might not be exactly accurate, but it is certainly mostly, if not entirely, written one man throughout the entirety of its existence, and that's why Berserk stands tall among most of the other things at around the same time. Miura, born July 11th, 1966, in Chiba Prefecture, Japan. By the time he was 10, he was already drawing and writing manga, which he had published for his classmates in a little school publication. He had drawn so many of his own professional-looking manga by the point that he was in high school, where, of course, enrolling in an artistic curriculum, where he would even meet fellow manga artist Koji Mori, and after high school he would become an assistant to George Morikawa, the guy most known for creating Hajime no Ippo, among other things, who only had Miura for an incredibly short time due to the fact that he could see his clear talent, of which he saw he was too good for even him. Even during that point in his younger days, he was already drawing a Dark Warrior with a massive sword. Applying and quickly getting into art college in 1985, several of his work was beginning to be published in magazines. Noah, which I think is said NOA, was published in Fresh magazine for a very short time. He worked with the man known under the pen name Bronson, whom, if you don't know him by that name alone, you'll probably know the thing that he created, which of course was another big inspiration for Miura, which of course is Fist of the North Star. The two of them made King of Wolves, and it's very similar feeling to Berserk when you read it. Finally, 1989, under Animal House, began printing the early version of Berserk, and though the initial prototype involved a whole other version of the character with an eye patch and a kind of being a bit of a big jerk, the main version that we would get in 1989 would be a little bit more subdued, but still pretty, like, you know, angry and screamy, of which the character would evolve over time as Miura would begin to write it. Miura has lots of clear influences, which you can see both in his art style and writing. Hellraiser, Name of the Rose, arts of M.C. Escher, and Salvador Dali. Brothers Grimm fairy tales are especially a big inspiration to him, mostly for this dark fantasy and medieval setting. Conan, Excalibur, Mad Max. The man certainly loves his fantasy and crazy monsters and weird-looking abstract creatures, and you can really tell that through Miura's own art style. Berserk, as it would grow and shift, would grow into this massive world full of strange creatures and characters, various settings of which the characters would traverse from long distances in order to get wherever they may need. Berserk is often shown to be this series, which is very much, despite being about a man with a massive sword, is one that is still an introspective one, not just about the actual physical challenges of demons, but fighting one's own demons inside themselves. What may seem like a lack of direction eventually results in the characters getting where they need to be by the end point of the arc. So even if characters may be stuck on a boat for a good 5 years due to the fact that hiatuses sure became a thing, it all made sense by the time they got to Elf Island. But let me go ahead and tell you what Berserk is like, what Berserk is all about, and what it is reading through it. I would personally recommend reading it. If it isn't clear, I'm already an incredibly big fan of Berserk. I've been for a long time. I didn't just now read Berserk in recent years. I read it back in high school, back in like 2016-17, and absolutely loved the shit out of it, waiting for the next chapter for as long as I possibly could. I absolutely adored Berserk, right? Now, mind you, this was during when a certain show came about, and I'll tell you right now, the anime is either not good, as mentioned, or the one that is good doesn't really cover too much, right? Hopefully, eventually we'll get a better anime adaptation that maybe continue on from the movies, and we'll even talk about those later on in the video. But, you know, reading the manga is something different, right? The actual art, even if you'd animated it better, just wouldn't really fit the same way. And that's not a new thing, you know, the manga often looks better than the actual anime that is presented from it. But for real though, oh my god, the art. Holy shit. If it isn't clear already, read the damn thing. Read it. Make this your first manga. I don't care. This is one of the greatest stories that there ever was, and, you know, maybe there's better ways to get into manga for your first time, but this is certainly a great story. Again, not one that everyone should be ready for. There is some absolutely messed up things that are in Berserk, so be ready for that. It is a very adult manga, but absolutely. The art is amazing, the characters are incredibly written, the story is this world-spanning D&D feeling adventure, and I wouldn't have it any other way. But if you'd like to, please go with me to really explore the series and what it really is as you go through it. The absolute sheer experience that is Berserk, probably the right way to read it, and also how it feels as you're doing so. As you begin Berserk, you ultimately find out that the Black Swordsman arc, as it begins, is one that is relatively simple. Guts is, of course, a man who is just sort of running into things, fighting guys, especially beating up big old monsters, and being followed around by a silly little fairy known as Puck, a roaming warrior in this hellish landscape that ultimately wants to kill him at all moments. The Black Swordsman is our main character, known as Guts. Guts is arrogant, he is angry, and he doesn't care about what you feel. Again, the prototype version was even worse as a character, but this guy isn't the kind of guy that you'd like, really. The Guts, as he is introduced, is a bit of a dick, roaming this wasteland of this world, fighting whatever monsters are around, trying to get to this hidden objective that would be pretty much kept secret. Mentioning the God Hand and mentioning wanting to get to them and trying to find a way in order to get revenge for whatever is going on with him. He's a man with big-ass armor and even bigger sword, and apparently a robot hand. The first major villain of the series is the Snake Baron, a baron that Guts goes to ask about the God Hand, which the baron then turns into a massive snake man in order to try and kill Guts. Guts easily dispatches him with just no threat at all. But of course, after the Snake Baron doesn't know anything about the God Hand, Guts ends up totally ending him. Later head to this man just known as the Count, who serves as a ruler of some sort of territory. He takes down the Count's guards and is helped by this small man named Vargas, who brings them to the Count's secret little area where he finds his Beherit. I'm kind of just gonna pronounce it like that for the rest of the series, so sure hope you don't mind how I pronounce Beherit. The strange artifact which apparently has allowed the Count to been given some sort of strange power. Is it anything like the Snake Baron? Well, we'll just have to see. Ultimately, continuing into the Count's castle, Guts finds out that Vargas was killed by the Count, and his men have been turning into big slug monsters. Guts absolutely obliterates them and gets revenge for Vargas. This battle's a little bit harder, but due to the fact that Puck was able to help Guts take the daughter hostage, the Count was then given a nearly fatal blow, of which he then is forced to use the Beherit to try and call for the God Hand. In doing so, we see their first appearance. These even more horrible monsters, even worse than the ones that we've seen so far, all show up to essentially take the Count to oblivion, to the abyss, pulled down by the souls of the very men that he had killed. It's there that Guts seems to recognize them. He's met them before, especially one of them. The one in the back with some kind of hawk helmet who he yells out the name of. Who is Griffith? Why does he know this man? What is going on here? The God Hand leaving Guts with absolutely nothing except for a very angry girl who tells Guts to fuck right off. Guts, normally stoic, finally shows a side of himself that we didn't see all the way up to this point. This notably very sad-looking face. When you read the Black Swordsman art, you ultimately see it and you go, what's happening? They don't really tell you how he got any of this, who he is, especially how he knows this guy named Griffith, right? When you read the Black Swordsman art, you're getting nothing, right? And that's all it was really meant to be. And that's what's unfortunate about Berserk as it begins. Guts, as he is, isn't a very likable character, which is sort of by design. You know, if you watch Road Warrior the first time, you might not necessarily like Mad Max as you begin, but you begin to see the good side of the guy, and you almost begin to see that there's a different side to this character as it was. But that being said, you know, it feels very basic. This is the part of the series of which is mostly focusing on fighting big monster things and seeing that still developing, but even back then, pretty good art of Miura. This is when he was young, man. I think he was my age during this time, which really makes me wonder about things, but sure, whatever. The Black Swordsman isn't really that great of a character, but you really just have to keep moving on to really fully understand what's happening here. And yes, this does take place a little bit after the next arc, but I would recommend reading it. The Black Swordsman arc does take place after the next arc, our Golden Age arc, but ultimately I would say it isn't a bad idea to start with it. I wouldn't say it's a bad idea either way of starting with this or reading it after the Golden Age arc. It's entirely up to the viewer. But that being said, that is where Berserk began. The Golden Age arc decided to go all the way back to firmly understand how this character got the way he did. The Golden Age arc begins immediately attempting to explain to you how Guts got the way he did. It shows you that even by birth, Guts wasn't living that great of a life. Born into this loveless world from the cold womb of his mother, who had been hung by a tree, crimes of unclear natures, he was found by a warrior known as Gambino, who raised Guts, ultimately due to the fact that his lover wanted to have a little kid. He would be trained in swordsmanship all the way to adulthood, fighting with big-ass swords, which were just, you know, regular swords by the size of adults. This is why Guts just feels more natural when he's swinging a absolutely massive sword. Gambino, however, was not his dad. Certainly not. He helped raise him as a warrior, but not as a person. He didn't treat him well at all, and even by the point, he would sell Guts to a man named Donovan. Donovan would ultimately rush down Guts and would do something very horrible to him. Something that Guts would very thankfully take revenge on. Guts from then forward would have a much harder time trusting people, especially by the point when Gambino, after losing his leg in battle, would grow more and more jealous of Guts. Guts in his abilities and his youth, and would, while trying to kill Guts, would reveal that it was him that sold him to Donovan. Guts in self-defense killed Gambino, the closest thing Guts would ever have to a father. Being branded a killer, he was hunted down by Gambino's men, and he would flee, eventually falling down, seemingly dead, off a cliff. Fighting off a pack of wolves, Guts would fight to survive until being discovered by another mercenary band. It would be even then he would continue his life as a slave, but Guts would continue throughout his life to work as a mercenary, fighting over and over again in battles until eventually meeting a very important person, Griffith, who easily defeats him and brings him to the camp. And though Griffith would decide that he would claim Guts as his own, but only if Griffith could defeat Guts in battle. Despite how hard Guts would fight, it would be Griffith that would ultimately defeat Guts and claim him as a member of the Band of the Hawk. Or Band of the Falcon? It really depends on what you want to go. Later on, it's called the Falcon of the Millennium, so you can kind of just go whichever one you want. Or we'll say Band of the Falcon. Some of the other members of the Band of the Falcon actually attempt to kill Guts after Griffith brings him in, but they are stopped by Casca. Casca was essentially Griffith's second in command and one of the most respected members of the Band of the Falcon, who ultimately doesn't really care too much for Guts, and they kind of often have several fights, but eventually she grows to at least kind of like him a little bit. It's as Guts is now working with the Band of the Falcon that Guts begins to, I guess, grow as a person. He slowly begins to let his guard down a little bit around other people, and he begins to learn about the other members of the Band of the Falcon. Over the next 3 years, Guts becomes one of the highest members of the Band of the Falcon and becomes great friends with its members. And though he is still a stoic warrior who is often on his own, he does at least feel some kind of camaraderie with this band, especially, of course, with Griffith. And how wouldn't you? Knowing Griffith, knowing how noble he is and what he has been through in order to gain any amount of headway, to even gain the ability to have a army of his own, what he had to put himself through, you really understand that Griffith is ready to do anything to fight for his beliefs. And that is an admirable ideal. To sacrifice oneself for their ideals is something admirable. And to be someone who a lot of people look up to made sense. Griffith is this man who just naturally has this leader aura to him that you want to look up to, that you want to have lead you into battle. A lot of the men and women that work with him are people that had been saved by him one way or another, especially Casca, who had been saved by him after almost an attempted assault on her. All of these guys are here because they firmly believe in Griffith, and of course they do. This noble leader who was ready to take absolutely any advantage that he has, and he is ultimately one of the smartest warriors and battle tacticians that there is in this series. Not just through sheer power, as several of the guys who work for him can take down multitudes of guys at once, especially, Guts, but he himself is a better tactician than a majority of the leaders that he will fight against throughout the series. Griffith is about to absolutely obliterate whole armies because he knows how to be an army way more than other people. He knows how to conquer, and it's his dream to ultimately be an emperor of a new world, someplace that he can ultimately make better for the people that he cares for. He believes in this idea of bringing back the worlds to this better state and bringing back this ancient kingdom of which he will be the emperor of. He's almost like this messiah-like figure, and of course it makes sense that people would go with Griffith. Look at the Band of the Falcon themselves, this likable cast of characters that just feels like this natural friend group. Pippin, Corcus, Rickard, Gaston, Jadeo, you have this group of awesome dudes that are so fun to hang with. Every time you see them on screen, there is a genuine camaraderie, and you want to see more of it. This series, which was essentially about one guy beating up monsters, immediately transitions to this awesome medieval boys hanging out being boys comic, and it's awesome. But it's not just them hanging out, it's of course them fighting shit. Griffith is, in this 3 years' time, the Band of the Falcon have been fighting various people and have been gaining a genuine reputation, and after fighting the Black Ram Iron Lance Knights, Griffith is knighted himself, and the band is formally recruited by Midland, who is essentially, vaguely Europe, who are fighting against Tudor, who I guess are vaguely similar to the Tudors in real life. A group that, of course, Griffith, as vaguely mentioned before, has had some history with. In one particular struggle, the Band of the Falcon finds itself in a standstill, which Guts goes, I'm gonna go around, where he meets Nosferatu an absolute monster of a man who turns into an absolute man of a monster. It's where here that you quickly remember the fact that monsters are a thing, big demons are a thing, and this is before Guts had a larger sword, so Guts is nearly killed. He is able to do some damage against Zod, and this will ultimately make Zod hate Guts forever. He said it's been 300 years since someone even laid a scratch, and that's why you're gonna super die. It's only with Griffith that Guts is able to even do any more damage. Our two best boys are able to fight against this massive monster. But it is on look of Griffith's spirit that ultimately Zod realizes that he must leave and wait for the right time to return, warning Guts of an inescapable death that will befall him should Griffith's dream ever collapse. Griffith had explained the Beherit to Guts. It's something that he had found one time and ultimately believes to be this good luck charm, and it's clear from what we know that there are others that have had the same sort of thing. Where this will lead, we'll just have to see, but one can only hope that Griffith is not foolish enough to even attempt to test its power. Guts wonders why Griffith would even waste his time with just a soldier, with Griffith responds with a question of, does he need a reason every time he's going to save Guts? It's clear the two genuinely care about each other. There is a clear, close friendship. There's a brotherly connection between these two. And you can tell why the two of them want to fight for each other. Soon enough, they are met by the King of Midland and his brother Julius, leader of the White Dragon Knights. Griffith is very surprised to meet the young daughter of the King of Midland, of which he gets smacked in the face for. Don't slap Griffith. You can't smack Griffith. How dare you? But this only makes Griffith really want the daughter more, and ultimately, hey, if you're gonna become king or emperor, you're gonna have to marry a princess. Julius, of course, sees this and also tries to kill Griffith with a poison arrow, but it's thanks to the Beherit that the poison arrow is incapable of hitting Griffith. You might think that ultimately the Golden Age arc is just a bunch of wacky boys fighting against the bad guy knights, but ultimately we get into the big, more complicated part of it all, the medieval, complicated politics of it all. Constant assassinations against each other will ultimately be taken by our main characters too, and Guts, due to the fact of how ready he is to fight for Griffith, does as Griffith says. And sure, of course, at this time this makes sense. That guy was a bad guy. Of course, Guts easily kills a man without a second thought. At least, he thinks so. Ultimately, in attempting to kill Julius, he ends up also accidentally killing Julius's young son. Part of this is why Guts begins to question why exactly this was needed to happen at all, if this was the right thing, and if he should really continue with the soldier business. All this is during the Princess Charlotte's dinner party, with Griffith starts kind of making the moves a little bit, not just on her, but also on the kingdom, making another grand speech, as he tends to do. Especially helping with him is Guts' revelation of his duty being done, of which Griffith doesn't scold him for messing up. If anything, he believes that it's more of a help. Not only is it less people to go against him later, but it's more reasons to blame it on their enemies to help gain more support. Soon enough, with more support from the kingdom, the Band of the Falcon sets out to fight against the Blue Whale Knights of Tudor. During this battle, Guts finds Casca nearly falling off of a cliff, and though he tries to catch her, he is shot off of his horse and falls down the cliff with her. Ultimately falling down to the river below, Guts pulls them ashore and finds them shelter from the chilly rain. Guts removes their drenched clothes from each other, and they stand in the cave, completely naked, both together. My, Guts, putting on the moves. Nope, Casca's awake. Fuck, this was a stupid idea. Though it doesn't go any further, you do begin to see there's clearly something between these two characters, as well as both of them really beginning to connect further here, as the two of them do begin to understand why either of them are even with Griffith in the first place. After suiting back up, the two of them are swarmed by the Blue Whale's forces, and though both of them do a pretty good job, Guts does an even better job, just taking like whole armies of dudes. The guy is insane. It's through this that Guts is able to get Casca out. He tells her to leave as he will take on as many men as possible. The rest of the Band of the Falcon come to help them, believing that they're in true danger. Meeting Casca first, they are led to her to where Guts was, finding out that he had taken 100 soldiers on his own. After being found, he connects more with Casca and tells her that he really does feel like he may not be able to keep this commitment, that he doesn't feel like his place is with this army. It's very possible that after this next battle, it may be his last, at least with the Band of the Falcon. Shortly afterwards, various military officials alongside Griffith attempt to devise a strategy in reclaiming the stronghold of Doldrey. Tudor itself is having a bit of a civil war, and one of their biggest leaders, Genon, is taking control of it. Griffith, as he tends to do, stands up and decides to take control of the situation, claiming that he and his army can take over, putting himself over even the White Tiger Knights, who couldn't even achieve this same feat. The Band of the Falcon goes to Doldrey, where they ultimately decide to go through this very important battle in the war against Tudor, where Griffith splits the Band of Falcon's forces into two groups, one accompanying him and Guts to lure Tudor's forces towards the river, and the other to be the quiet infiltration led by Casca. In the epic battle, the Band of the Falcon lures the Purple Rhino Knights, Guts taking down the fierce General Boscan, who ultimately breaks Guts' sword due to the fact that it had been worn down from the, 100 men that he killed before. But after a cleaver is thrown to him by someone that wishes him to continue fighting, he's able to kill the general, alongside Casca recapturing Doldrey. At the same time, Griffith goes off to confront Genon himself. Genon, the man responsible for the early funding of the Band of the Hawk, which will now lead him to this very crusade, believes he can try and use that one night that the two spent together to try and plead to Griffith, believing there's some kind of mutual attraction. He would soon find out the truth when he was stricken by the blade of the disgusted Griffith. Receiving abundant praise from Midland, both citizens and official alike, everyone is happy. Everyone is in support of Griffith. This feels like one of the highest moments for our boys. The victory ball is held in celebration, because of course it did. Another fantastic victory for the Band of the Hawk. Our boys, our funny medieval boys that end up getting poisoned. The Queen of Midland attempts to poison Griffith at the ball, and it's seeming that Griffith had been killed. Blessed would they know the fact that Griffith had known about this all the time. As right as the King of Midland is bestowing the title of White Phoenix General on Griffith, he sips from his goblet and falls to the ground. However, while they are celebrating their success, Griffith locks his political enemies all in the tower, where he begins to light it on fire. His visage looking over the men and women that were previously celebrating not just 6 seconds ago, but now screaming in pain as they find themselves on death's door. All this with help of one of their lowly workers, Foss, who asked Griffith how he even knew that they were going to try and poison him, of which he tells Foss it was the fear in the eyes that revealed their malicious intent. More and more you see this darker side of Griffith, and though you want to continue to believing that Griffith has everyone's best intent in mind, you do know that Griffith ultimately is not a perfect man. You begin to wonder, is it okay? Simply because these are people that wanted to cross him? You could kind of still go with that here. How many more people have to die simply just because they wanted to go against Griffith? The characters, they themselves, wonder if this is all okay. Griffith wonders whether he's too cruel, if he's becoming the kind of king that he doesn't want to rule his perfect world. But Guts tells him what he believes to be true, that all this is part of achieving Griffith's dream. That Griffith would do anything to achieve his dream, even if it ends up being things that he may not want to do. 1 month later, Guts finally decides to leave the Band of the Falcon. He more than likely took a little bit longer in order for things to settle down, but even still, Guts decides he can't cling to Griffith's dream anymore. On the morning of his departure, the whole band, our funny medieval boys, tell him to stay. They're part of the same band, they're part of the same brotherhood, and Griffith shows up for one last duel. Griffith fully believes that he cannot achieve his goal without Guts. Griffith knows that without Guts, he cannot achieve his dream, and if he is to see Guts leave, he would rather kill him than have him not in his service. And at least he has control of Guts' fate, rather than being incapable of doing anything about it. But Guts shows that he is in fact much different person than who he was when they had met the first time. and despite Griffith's best attempts, Guts is able to best his opponent. On the night of his departure, Guts is met by a knight whose armor looks very similar to that of a skeleton. Known as Skull Knight, he warns of the eclipse that will take place in a year's time. A torrent of madness, a tempest of death for which the human body could never atone. A foreboding scene of which one is not sure what to make of it. Who is this man? What is he here for? What does he know? And why is his armor the coolest fucking thing? Meanwhile, Griffith, distraught, sets out and seeks Charlotte. He seduces her that night, and he is caught soon afterwards. He's arrested by Midland guards for treason, and he's taken into a torture chamber in a far-off tower, well away from anyone else. Finally able to put a stop to Griffith's rise, Griffith's influence is immediately cut in half, and the entirety of the band has now become criminals. Casca takes command to ensure that any amount of our funny medieval boys are able to survive. Everything had been looking up quickly turns down, and everything begins to change. Corcus himself states that even if they would continue to survive, the band has no meaning without Griffith, or Guts. Guts had spent his time training in the mountains in search of a purpose of his own, even finding the hut of a blacksmith known as Godo. He entered a little tournament fighting against various people, mostly a man known as Sealat. Salat? I'm gonna say Salat. But it's there that he finds out that the Bandit of the Falcon isn't doing all that well. Guts tracks them down to find out the exact nature of what's been happening with Griffith, of which the band decides to set out and rescue Griffith. It's there that Casca confronts Guts, the two of which haven't spoken in an entire year. It's understandable. How could he essentially finally confess his love to her and then leave, finally connecting, having her find someone that she really feels that she can connect with, and then just leave? But the two of which finally reconnect after this year, and finally fully putting the moves on her. Let's go, Guts. The band truly is nothing without Griffith, and thus, with help of Princess Charlotte herself, they make their way to the Tower of Rebirth, through the sewers, all the way up, fighting the various horrible torturers that exist in it to hopefully save their leader. The problem is, when they get there, Griffith is different. Griffith is not the same messiah-like figure that we once saw all those years ago. He's nothing now. He's broken beyond compare. He's forced in this iron helmet that he's worn for a year. He's emaciated. You can see his bones. He is crippled. He is flayed. He is a shell of his former self who barely clings on to life. Guts goes and embraces him, and he is so happy to see him that he's incapable of seeing the fact that when Griffith finally sees him, he attempts to choke him. But due to the fact that he is so weak, he can barely move his hands. The group leaves from here, where they're encountered by the Black Dog Knights, led by these horrible dog-like guys that ultimately challenge them to a duel, hoping that they can to any place that is safe for them. This is hopefully their last remaining roadblock, this wacky group of weird knights. Let's take them down. But what's horrible is that there's another god-awful looking monster there that Guts has to take care of. But this time, Guts has to fight this large monster on his own. Griffith is incapable of even holding a sword on his own. This is why soon afterwards, even though Guts believes that he had won and that they can leave, the monster returns and grabs Griffith, taunting him and demanding him to summon the God Hand. The God Hand. That sounds familiar. Zod intervenes when the leader of the Dog Knights tries to kill Griffith, as Zod seemingly knows more than he did. Zod gives Griffith his Beherit before flying off. The group almost begins to believe that Griffith will never lead them again. They are in a very low spot. This really does feel like it's nearly the end of our funny medieval boys. But hey, at least they're all together, right? It'll take a while, but surely Griffith will find a way to be back where he was. Guts will certainly learn how to swing a sword more, and we'll be able to get back where we were. Maybe we'll need another little time skip, right? But surely our boys will be back together once more, and they will figure out a way to help Griffith, right? Right? Griffith, what's going on? What are you doing, Griffith? 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 Blood sacrifice to the Beherit as it shifts and horrifically screams. Griffith and all of his comrades, Band of the Falcon, are transported into another dimension. Horrific faces lay out the land. Massive hand arises with Guts and Griffith on top as they meet the horrific monsters from earlier in the series. This whole time you had almost forgotten, or hell, if you didn't know at all, you still would have believed just as hard that everything was going to be fine. Maybe there was a way that something may have changed, something good had to have happened, but it was always going to be this way. Griffith will become a member of the God Hand known as Femto. Everyone that he had worked with, that had helped him try to build his dream, his empire, had built him as he was, would be sacrificed. All of them would be branded, and demons would be sent after them, and if they wouldn't be killed in this horrific blood feast that is the eclipse, they'd be hunted down forever due to the mark. The feast of monsters begins. One by one, every single member of the Band of Falcon dies. Every single moment that we had built up, every single time that we had hoped there would be a better future, every minute of camaraderie meant nothing. All of it was part of Griffith's dream. Griffith would do anything to accomplish his dream, even if it was things he didn't want to do. You could tell that there was something happening in Griffith this whole time, and all it needed was a little push. Their blessed king of longing would join the God Hand, while everyone in the Band of the Falcon would be left in the waste. The only two surviving would be Guts and Casca. But Griffith, despite taking care of and saving from such a horrible assault, would ultimately be the very man that would cause another one to her. Torrent of madness, a tempest of death for which the human body could never atone. This is the eclipse. All thanks to the very man that we had followed this whole time. The man that we had hoped would lead us to a better future. But at what cost? This is why Guts is the way he is. Mentally broken, angry every single moment of his day, wanting only revenge on Griffith. Guts was looking for a purpose. He sure found it. Being saved by Skull Knight, Guts will be led towards Rickert and Erica, who would thankfully be so far away from this that they wouldn't be involved. He would leave Casca with them, and it would be Skull Knight that would tell him that he would now be hunted for the rest of his life, due to the mark on his neck. When demons would attempt to kill Guts, they would be sent off. Skull Knight would tell them that they had found a new torch, the darkness to feast on. Believing that he meant Casca, Guts would rush to her, soon finding out she was giving birth to her and Guts' son. Unfortunately, due to the eclipse, had now been turned into a horrific demon child, fading away into the astral world at sunrise. After a month of recuperating, Guts would set out, combat demon kind, and find revenge. Now with his cannon arm and the greatest of the swords ever made by Godo, he would become the man that we would know as the Black Swordsman. In the Conviction arc, we get the continuing adventures of Guts and Puck. Now that we are certainly past the Black Swordsman arc, we see the continuing adventures of them dealing with various demons. Mostly for the Lost Children's chapter, we have a girl that essentially believes herself to be an elf, but in truth is an apostle. Her name is Rosine, and she constantly tries to attempt to get her friend to join her as a, quote, elf, ultimately turning a whole bunch of children into elves. But burning them all alive, Guts has to deal with the fact that he has, in fact, murdered a bunch of children. A bunch of the other people around them don't understand the exact context of the fact that they were turned into demons, so some people just believe Guts as a murderer of children. Guts fights against the more monstrous forms of the people that had been turned by Rosine. It has a massive and pretty fun fight against her. It is through this that ultimately, after defeating her, Skull Knight eats her Beherit and reveals that he's kind of been doing that for a bit. That, as well as it gives things to follow for the Iron Chain Knights to try and capture Guts. Believing the horrors they see to be his doing, they have the prophetic warrant for his detainment by the Holy See. Guts can only muster enough strength to ward off some of the attacking knights before he's overwhelmed by their vice commander. He attempts in his last moment to try and eliminate their commander, Farnese, but he is incapacitated and taken down fully by our attendant, Serpico. Farnese will be a very important character going forward, and throughout the story we get little bits of her and Serpico's story over time. She was raised by a very rich family, and when she met Serpico when she was younger, she kind of saved his life and claimed him as her servant. As time went on, they ultimately grew closer, and he became her greatest confidant. Over time, you also would eventually find out that Serpico is actually directly related to Farnese. He is the illegitimate child of Farnese's father. Serpico has followed her all this way since, due to the fact that he really cares for her, and the two of them are in the Holy Iron Knights due to the fact that Farnese kind of went a little bit wild. She was quite the horrific child. She was then set up in a monastery and became incredibly, really dedicated to her faith, to the point that when Serpico met his mother, his birth mother, who had been claimed as a heretic, he hesitated for a minute, of which Farnese told him that if he does not kill her, she will kill the both of them. It is a very messed up relationship, but it'll be one that we will see continue throughout the series. Guts restrained, he is questioned by the very whip-happy Farnese. Puck is able to help Guts leave as they use Farnese as a hostage. Serpico attempts to follow them. All of them are followed by demonic spirits. They put themselves in dogs and end up being gross, weird dog demons, and one of which turns into the creepiest of horses you'll ever see in your life. One of whom even attempts to control Farnese herself and attempts to do something with Guts, but she's able to snap out of it, despite the fact that, Guts didn't do anything to her, except, I guess, kidnap her. Serpico v Guts Part 1 doesn't really happen, as Guts easily gets away because, bigger sword and all that, and Guts sets back off to find Casca. Casca, being taken care of for around 2 years since the eclipse, just kind of goes off on her own and meets up with a couple prostitutes that begin taking care of her. Guts now begins looking for her, but more importantly, the Tower of Conviction, where he believes he will find the ability to get to the God Hand, or at least closer to the astral realm. The whole time, he's slowly being harassed by this wolf spirit that feeds his anger, and feeds from his anger, this horrific wolf demon that apparently is always going to be inside Guts forever. The Iron Chain Knights worry about the Kushans, this other country, which ultimately is essentially the Ottomans, because, the Crusades and all that, and they are sent to guard Mazgas. Mazgas, who is the man in charge of the Tower of Conviction, is the most fucked up priest you'll ever know. He has a group of followers that believe they have been saved by him, and due to that, they wear some of the creepiest things ever and are incredibly devout followers of his that essentially do whatever he wants them to, which mostly is find heretics and do horrible things to them. Just like really bad things to them, which sounds like it's like a Berserk thing to do, but that's also just what people did back in medieval times. Farnese begins wondering about her faith due to the fact that she sees just how horrible Mazgas is, and just how devout he is. Can that man stop doing that? While Guts is on the search for Casca, he fights off several soldiers, fully impressing this little guy named Isidro, who will now be this guy who will be a pretty important character going forward. He even attempts to steal Guts' sword, but due to the fact that Guts' sword is so damn big, he isn't, capable of doing that. One of the prostitutes in charge of taking care of Casca decides to bring her to a crazy sex rave. Not for the sex part, but just to be like, I'm in charge of watching you today, so stay with the car, Casca. Demons obviously show up there and take over some of the people, including their weird leader, who's like a guy wearing a goat head with like a snake covering his penis. And obviously he then turns into actually a goat snake penis man. Several of Mazgus's men and the Iron Chain Knights begin taking away some of the people that they believe to be heretics, which of course are some of the prostitutes taking care of Casca. Isidro is able to actually be useful and distracts the weird guys in the gathering long enough for Guts to fight against them, and in the process several of the Iron Chain Knights try and take advantage of this, also taking away our supporting cast who just got out of being captive. But more importantly, Serpico tries to fight Guts again. Serpico v Guts 2 has them on a cliff, of which Serpico tries to take advantage of this, but very clearly still not gonna happen. Larger sword still wins. As Casca, Nina, and the others attempt to escape Conviction Tower, Mazgus takes advantage of the situation. Demons begin to attack the tower. The demon child that Casca gave birth to actively protects her and ends up bringing her right into the hands of Mazgus. Mazgus, who now decides that he is going to burn her at the stake for everyone, believing her to be an incredibly important witch. In the process of doing so, gaining their own demonic powers, as all of them become apostles, all of them with big angelic wings. Skull Knight arriving, seeing that there is something very important going on here, for a very quick second, helps out our supporting cast before continuing on to meet this egg-looking man, this demon who looks very much like a large beherit. He claims himself to be the egg of the new world. Skull Knight leaves him, believing the fact that this may be something that needs to happen. As Guts fights against Mazgus, as Mazgus gains this strengthened, armored, feathered form, barely able to defeat him before essentially body slamming him with his sword all the way down to his death. While all that is happening, the egg meets with the demonic child, deciding that the two of them will die together and be reborn into a new form. This entire time, there have been various visions of a white falcon, a white hawk in the sky, matching a prophecy of a changing of the world. Very vision is what brings Zod to the place, to take care of the man that he knows will be the leader of a new world. Very being that is birthed from the egg that then dies and rebores itself and the demon child to become the new vessel for Griffith. As the day breaks and the Kushans try to take advantage of the now weakened holy city, they are fought off by Zod and soon enough Guts, who tries to get to what Zod is hiding, the fully reborn Griffith, who with Zod escapes, flying far away from the city. Guts, with Casca in tow, returns to Erica, who reveals that Griffith had been talking to Rickard. Rickard, who knows nothing about what had happened with Griffith, gets in the way of Guts, as Guts tries to kill the very man that had ruined everything that Guts had cared about. Griffith is fought against by Zod, who now is forever marked by Griffith, one of his massive horns having been cut off by Griffith in order to show the sheer amount of power that Griffith can easily use. At this moment, I do not think that Guts would even be able to kill Griffith. Just stop trying to kill Griffith. It's not gonna happen right now, Guts. You can't hit Griffith right now. Wondering what everything was about, Rickard asks Guts what happened at the eclipse and what it has been happening to Guts, which Guts tells him everything. With Griffith and Zod gone, Rickard tries to come along with Guts, asking to come along with his revenge mission, but Guts tells him to stay, that he has a much brighter path far away from the doomed paths of Guts and Casca. Despite the sudden shift in the exact nature of Griffith, it was clear that the story was still heading somewhere. Though the eclipse had seemingly killed the entirety of the supporting cast, there was one that was building. One that wasn't clear what exactly was going to happen with them, but there would be a new party of fun characters very, very soon. Thus we get to the Millennium Falcon arc. Or the Falcon of the Millennium arc. It's just funnier to call it the Millennium Falcon arc because, you know, Griffith and Puck set out through Puck's own idea in his homeland. The Millennium Falcon arc mostly will be about them getting to the place where they can actually go and do that. Meanwhile, Griffith comes to Shet, a western Midland city that had been conquered by the Kushans. He kills the conquering general, as the general was being visited by Stelot and the Tapeja of the Bakiraka. I don't know if I pronounced any of that correct, but we'll just have to go with it. Among the captives freed by Griffith is a girl named Sonia, who is quickly smitten with Griffith and cares literally about nothing else but Griffith. Griffith continues rebuilding his band of the Hawk, immediately grabbing the attention of many soldiers and people who believe in him just as much as his old band and you or I had believed in him before. Various of some of the strongest apostles in the entirety of the series join him. Their beast forms look absolutely phenomenal, and they are incredibly strong even in their human forms. Alongside them, a regular guy named Mule Wolfmane, who is kind of your human look into Griffith. The kind of regular person like you or I is able to view Griffith from this angelic point of view. Now, most people are going to view him even more so due to the fact that he now literally actually gives off this bright aura, believing he would be a true leader of a new world. Wyndham fell under Kushan control, and they're now currently being led by the leader of the Kushans. Though we don't quite see it fully till later, many of the men and women have been brought to some kind of place where they're being put together for some sort of strange Kushan ritual, which eventually we will find as the man-made Beherit. It's crazy to see how much energy is required to make something like that work. It oddly makes me think of Fullmetal Alchemist, in a way. Kanishka, the Kushan emperor, ruins Wyndham as a home and essentially takes Charlotte for himself. Though Charlotte never gives it up to him because, that guy is 80. Jesus, ew. He still keeps trying, and I think the one thing that's stopping him is his fear of Griffith. Though he fully knows that Griffith is a godlike form and can probably easily destroy him as he is now, he does believe that he is the true leader of the world, and will attempt to oppose gods themselves if he has to. Griffith's army begins to try and invade Wyndham, and during this, Griffith gets to the Tower of Rebirth and takes Charlotte with him, to ultimately regroup elsewhere and attempt to fight back later. We get back to Guts' group as after they left the Holy Iron Chain Knights, Brace and Serpico begin to go after Guts, not to attempt to attack him or kill him, but to join him. They find that their faith had been shattered and they want another purpose in life, and they feel that such a man who was able to fight against such strange demons isn't a bad person to follow. And soon enough, they are met by a silly little witch. The silly little witch does in fact have a name. It is Shirk, but I'm gonna call her Silly Witch the whole time. She brings them to this big golem-guarded witch house where they find her teacher, Flora, who gives her cool-ass magic armor and weapons and also promises to hopefully get rid of Casca's mark. Only if they promise to save a nearby village from trolls. It's while traveling with them that Guts begins to really look at this party as a new group of friends. Over time he begins to realize that in a way he has kind of achieved what he wanted to, becoming equals with Griffith, at least the Griffith that he knew. The Griffith that he knew led with respect, he led with care, and he did what he needed to for the people that he cared about. So it brought him down a bad path, and Guts is certainly not on a perfect path either. Guts is doing more what the old Griffith used to do. Guts himself is becoming the very man that he had looked up to before. This man with a natural aura that you believe has your better intent in mind, that has a better idea on what to do with the world. And even if these ideas of grandeur aren't quite there with Guts, you at least know that he is a great leader. We've seen that he can certainly use a whole army for his betterment, and we know that he can do quite a bit in combat. But more importantly, we know that he is great with having a group of people surrounding him. And as had what happened before of him opening up to this brotherhood of guys, we now have our fun little D&D party with our 2 healers, our 2 DPS, and our tank seems to be doing pretty well for itself. It's natural that they are trusted to fight against the trolls. Well, obviously not immediately trusted. Hell, they take the one look at the witch and they go, we might burn you, but then they are like, okay, there's trolls coming. So we then begin this massive battle against the trolls. It's actively pretty hard to fight against a whole lot of them, but they are able to do a lot of work against the trolls until ultimately more things show up that are worse than trolls and begin throwing shit. So it takes them a while. All of these guys begin to figure out how to fight against magical creatures, showing that the guys with the magical weapons are just as helpful as the girl with the crazy magic powers. Said girl's magic powers end up washing away a lot of the trolls, but then end up also washing away Farnese and Casca. Although quickly there is a little celebration of fighting off the trolls, Guts and the rest of the group go out to where the trolls are, finding the silliest little guy there ever was, and seeing that this is an area that is very close to the spiritual realm where monsters naturally exist, and that it seems that something is seemingly pulling the two together. But more importantly, they fight off the trolls that were doing some bad things to people in those caves. I will not talk about the baby trolls. Skull Knight does have to end up helping them, and he straight up tells you the reason why he's been eating the Beherits. It's to make a Beherit sword that he pukes out to cut through the realm. It brings them back to the witch's house, which unfortunately has been set ablaze. Several demons, including Zod, are there causing trouble, and Zod and Skull Knight once again fight. Guts fights against Grunbeld and is nearly absolutely murdered, but he is brought to the basement as the spirit of the dying mage teacher fends off the other apostles. Guts begins using a magical armor from her basement, which nearly rips him apart, but does allow him to be incredibly strong. Laura tells Witch Girl that it's up to her to hopefully stop Guts' anger from taking over himself, and this will ultimately be what they do for a majority of the series going forward. Skull Knight warns them of more battles that will happen, but also tells them of Elfheim and how it might save Casca's mind. And soon afterwards, they meet the Moonlight Child. This mysterious child that comes only at moonlight, comes only at night. Coming only at night is very much a demon thing. Leaving during the day is very reminiscent of something else that we had seen earlier. One has to wonder if this was also part of the rebirth from the egg. If this might be Casca and Guts' child brought back. It certainly looks like it. It's a mystery that will be kept away for a while. Towards the Millennium Falcon arc, we get Guts and the rest of the group fighting against various monsters that are being controlled by the Kushans from a distance, from like a boat far away. Though they come to a city soon afterwards, finding some of the empty husks of people that have been put to death, they attempt to move on and continue and find a boat so they may make their way to Elfheim. It is here that ultimately Farnese meets her family. Her family, mostly her father, don't really listen to her desires and decide that she must come back, or else she'll answer for the fact that she left her squadron. We see her little fancy life for a while, and we see why she really did hate her boring, fancy, rich life. And hell, the guy that she was arranged married to is still around, and he's like, you can have my boat, to be honest. So that guy's cool, but mostly, you'll see. The main characters obviously decide that they're gonna go get Farnese, and as they do so, demons show up, mostly a big old demon tiger. Farnese certainly wanted to leave, but, Serpico makes it a little bit harder, as he's just like, hey, Serpico v Guts v3, and Serpico even gets Guts to, make things fall on him, having the ceiling fall on him, but even that doesn't stop the fact that big sword better than small sword. Stop trying to fight Guts, stop! The group then goes out to make sure they can get their way to the boat, but right then, more demons show up to take over the city. It's there that our main characters fight to get to the boat, even fight against the very Kushan mages that had sent them monsters beforehand, one of whom summons essentially a crazy, otherworldly beast that makes the witch, who now is currently teaching Farnese to try and do the same thing, to summon another monster. Guts and his little witch friend fight against the Kushan mages, and ultimately Ganishka stops him from escaping as he goes, hey, you failed. Zod, who of course is around for the very purpose of fighting against the Kushans, decides that him and Guts team up only this once to fight against Ganishka's spiritual form, but he may be weakened, so that Griffith may take him where his main physical form is. In this awesome moment of Guts riding Zod, the two of them strike at Kushan's strange spiritual head form. And though Zod really wanted to kill Guts at the time, Zod goes, alright, later on, when you're much stronger, deciding that now is not the time to end their rivalry. But he does swear that it will eventually come to a conclusion. With them, the group now leaves into the boat, as the other very important moment of the Millennium Falcon arc happens. Griffith's army continues against the now weakened Ganishka, who now goes full mad mode and attempts to use his man-made Beherit to grow into an even stronger form. Using this old guy that Griffith met, who was the Pontiff of the Holy See, Griffith secures support from a whole lot of people. A whole lot of people are now beginning, more so than ever, to believe him to be this messiah-like leader of a new world. You get this just multiple panels, just whole chapters of monster fights, amazing artwork of monster v monster, whole armies fighting each other. Absolutely amazing artwork, one after another. As Ganesh's massive tree-like form begins to grow, absorbing the souls of the city, killing thousands, leaving destruction in his wake, creating little creatures from the remains of his soldiers to fight against Griffith. But despite everything, it means nothing. Griffith gets to the top. Ganesh begins to lose himself, lose his sanity, and it's from here that we find out his origin story, being threatened by the people that he trusted ever since birth. Since his brother, since his mother, since his father, since his own son have all attempted to kill him. He's paranoid and wishes to be the only leader of everything. We see the moment that he claimed the Beherit and became an apostle in the first place, and we begin to fully understand why his mental state is the way that it is. As all of this is happening, a version of the God Hand begins manifesting. They can tell that something important is going to happen, and it is due to this that, of course, Skull Knight takes advantage of this. Using his Beherit sword, he attempts at that moment to kill Griffith. But Griffith knew that it was going to happen. He gets Skull Knight to slash Ganishka in twain, not just killing him, but then unleashing a portal to the astral plane, ripping the world in two, bathing the world in the light of the Hawk. Not only does this change the world completely, but it brings back Falconia itself. Every single part of the world feels this shift, as now the astral plane with all of the strange creatures, is now merging with the physical world, the world of ours. How couldn't you believe that Griffith was a great leader who beckons a betterment of mankind when naturally his aura bathes the entire world in this wonderful, fantastic light? How couldn't you believe that this man has your betterment in mind when he continues to tell you and show you the very might that he has? He raised an ancient city, which was destroyed a long time ago by the old emperor. The old emperor who was once known as the Skull King. The old emperor who a long time ago had caused his own eclipse, which led to the very love of his life dying in his arms. A man whose path, at least said by Zod, is very similar to Guts' own. A man who, more than likely, we've met various times. And if so, has caused another important event in history. Millennium Falcon arc ends in a massive shift in the world, and while they're dealing with that, Guts and friends are headed to Elfheim on the boat. The boat is where a good majority of the Fantasia arc, which is the current arc, and a lot of the time people kind of know it as that, due to the fact that during the Fantasia arc, Muir began working on other stuff and taking his time, because, hey, you know, at this point, you've already made one of the greatest mangas of all time, so you can kind of do whatever you want. But let's take a little bit of a side to kind of talk about some other extra stuff of Berserk. You know, might as well put that here. It's during this time, around where the Fantasia arc is in the middle of it, we'll get to it later, is when I would be introduced to Berserk. I do believe really early Fantasia arc, because they definitely were still on the boat. But, you know, that would be when I would find out about Berserk. Oddly enough, I'd find out about Berserk from a Watch Mojo video about, like, I don't know, some, like, craziest endings anime or something. And I would literally actually find out about Berserk through, you know, But it would still be a shocking moment for me, as even though I would know it going into it, when I would later actually experience Berserk, it would be something that it would still hit incredibly hard. Naturally, I would be fully introduced to Berserk by a good friend of mine who I met in high school, who had ultimately introduced me to various anime, and it's really where I got into ones I would actually think are good, like Fooly Cooly, Fullmetal Alchemist, especially Gurren Lagann, God's sakes. But of course, you know, Berserk. The two of us actually watched all three of the Golden Age arc movies, which were the retelling of the Golden Age arc that were released mid-2010s, which I knew about and was interested in, but it was cool to watch it with them. That's when I brought like my laptop everywhere in school, and we just like watched them during like certain free periods that we had, right? It would be that soon I would go also watch the original show before fully reading the actual manga itself, experiencing the friggin' 3 times is a lot, by the way, but oddly enough, it's not the only times it's been shown. There's been 2 separate games that have shown a version of it happening. So it's, you know, it's a very notable moment, right? Ultimately, that would be us and our knowledge of Berserk leading, of course, into 2016, of which would be the, you know, release of the anime that would attempt to continue where both the original and the Golden Age trilogy left off, leading into kind of the Black Swordsman arc, which would be adapted in parts of both of those versions of the Golden Age arc, as well as mostly the Conviction arc. While the Berserk 2016 anime, which for some reason I refer to as Berserk 2017, I don't know why, had a second season which went a little bit into the Millennium Falcon arc. It didn't go any further, and that's because it's dog shit. It is notably a bad-looking anime. Well, you can see how fantastic the 80s one looks, and a good majority of the time, the Golden Age trilogy looks great. It's on the occasion CG, and that doesn't look perfect all the time, but it's perfectly passable. There's worse CG, and that worse CG is 2016's Berserk. Oh my god, it's awful! I hate that known as nipples, and the way they do shadowing, and the way they do movement, and the way they do facial expressions, and the way they do fucking 2D and 3D sometimes. It's just, why? It sucks because you really do want like a good adaptation, because you can't ask people to read. There's a whole bunch of great like expanded media for a lot of the franchises I enjoy, and a lot of this like cool stuff that I like to have in the mind when I'm like watching either these shows or movies that I'm watching that are connected in the same universe, that are probably canon, you know, Star Trek, Star Wars, and all that. You know, I can't. It's so harder to like ask someone who's getting into the series to be like, read this book. You know, so not everyone necessarily is into that sort of thing, and not everyone's going to read manga. You know, hell, I have only read like a few manga because I never know what to read, and it takes longer. And honestly, I connect more with anime, right? For instance, I'm a big fan of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which I should probably make a video of at some point when I think about it. But I didn't enjoy Part 5 when I read it, but it's my favorite part now that the anime came out. You know, isn't that weird? Some people just connect things better when it's a visual way, and that's why I'm glad we eventually got like a good adaptation of Dune, for instance, right? But you know, the fact that there's only really one good version of Berserk that I would recommend to people, and it's like 30 years old or more now, is crazy. Hopefully a new adaptation, which has been announced, will like do better, but who knows? You think, considering the fact that Berserk has so many things with it that have been inspired by it, that Berserk would have more stuff, but that's really it. Like the 2 shows and the trilogy of movies, which oddly was re-edited into also a show for some reason. That's weirdly not regular thing in anime? I don't know. But it has had 3 games, right? Seeing the various ways that people have attempted to adapt the Berserk story is very interesting. There's a lot to go over. There's a lot of characters that you need to pay attention to. There's a lot of intriguing plot lines happening all at once, so you can't really cut any of it, because you'll never know when some of it will come back. some of it is important for a bit and then leaves and will come back later. And it's not necessarily the way, like, One Piece will do it. You got, like, a character that is in, like, Arc 3, and they're way later in Arc 56, and you're like, whoa, that guy. But, like, you know. Thus we get to the Fantasia arc, the current arc going on, and ultimately I'll go through this pretty quickly. I'm on a boat, I'm on a boat, I'm on a boat, everyone look at me, cause I'm sailing on a boat. A character they met while in the city continues to fight against them for way too long of a time, revealing he's a big tentacle monster who wants to eat them. They alongside girl who apparently is a mermaid, she called him Marrow, but whatever, who isn't sure about her fishy nature till ultimately she has to save Isidro, which they got a thing going on that whole time. It's kind of cute, to be honest. Except the parts where it's pervy. Stop it, you creepy, creepy boy. Well, there is a little bit of intrigue in terms of what exactly is happening with the people that are living in the village on the island that they settle down on for a minute or two. It's quickly revealed to be more Bonebeard, who is connected to this big sea god. They never really explain what the sea god is, or why the mermaids don't like him, and why they fought so long ago, or why putting him under an island seals him. Well, they do fight him for a very long time, but the mermaids help, obliterate this massive monster that they fought, as they then head to Elfheim. Side note, quickly look at this graph. This is all the hiatuses within chapters as we go through the Berserk series, and as you'll see, the 2010s is kind of where things slowed down tremendously. And that's fine. Listen, writers aren't writing all of the time. They have lives outside of this, and your boy was working on other stuff during this time. But when you're on the boat for so long, and it's kind of not a very interesting chapter, when it goes on for as long as it did, plus the hiatus, yeah, there's a bit of a reason why I don't care too much about the boat. Sorry if you liked the boat and the boat. Meanwhile, Griffith is trying to lead Falconia, and he's doing as mentioned, and we see the state of it when Rickard gets there. The more interesting part of the arc really happens with Rickard. Rickard is there to see what Griffith is doing. He sees the way Griffith has led, and that it's pretty good. You have to admit that people are living happily under Griffith, as one would have hoped when you had followed Griffith. And the monsters are in their own whole thing, fighting and shit, and, his sister meet up with, oddly enough, one of the Kushan wizard guys and some of the Kushan members that were just kind of chilling, trying to spy around in Falconia. After getting this big tour, Rickard is led to hang out with Griffith. Though at first he sees this guy that he had followed into battle, that he would have died for, that he wanted to help achieve his goal, his dream. He realizes this is not Sam Griffith. This is not the same man that would have done anything for his people. This is the man that did horrible things for himself. Griffith and some other foolish people might believe that Griffith had done nothing wrong. But Griffith had done everything horrible. Griffith had achieved a different dream, a different goal, which wasn't the same dream that the original Griffith had. It may look like it, and hell, it may work for a time, but it's not the same. Fact is, Rickard knows what we all know. All of this nice, pretty looking, big, majestic city is all bullshit. It's all a lie. Griffith is leading this country that he believes is perfect, but all of it is a lie. Nothing about what Griffith is doing is what he wanted to do. All of this is a fabrication of what his dream was supposed to be. All of it is him lying to himself, believing that he could justify everything that he had did wrong. Rickard knows this and slaps Griffith. You can't do that. You can't just slap Griffith. What are you doing? And though Griffith lets it go, the generals certainly don't. And now Rickard has to be helped by the Kushans to get out of there and survive. Now they're being hunted by one of the most, horrific looking ones, who's kind of always in a monster form. Finally, though, we get to Elfheim. After fighting some scarecrows, they're stopped by a mage that ultimately brings them to the Elf Queen. They are bring to the Spirit Tree within Elfheim, where the Flower Storm Monarch has taken residence. Puck and one of the guys that they've brought on them with the boat, Magnifico, try to, comically usurp the throne, of which they are sent to community service afterwards, they meet the real Flowerstorm monarch, a being of sheer beauty who stuns everyone around her with the fact that they unlikely believed it probably was going to be something like Puck in a silly little hat. Her name, Danon, allows Farnese and Silly Witch to go through the Corridor of Dreams. It'll have them sleep and astral project themselves into Casca's mind. The two of them have their own wacky, fun dreams leading into Casca's, which, due to the fact that her mind is so messed up, at first doesn't make any sense. Dive deeper and deeper into her dreamscape. They must go through parts of her brain and piece her back together slowly over time with help of a small dog, missing an arm, who is chained to the coffin that holds her broken body. After slaying the many monsters, including the horrific image that is a demonic version of Griffith, the doll-like figure inside the coffin changes and reawakens to the real Casca. Casca, after so long, returns, and it is an amazing moment. We've seen her broken. She was gone for so long that you forgot who she was, and the only thing she wants to do is see Guts. You have this beautiful moment of them walking to each other, finally really reuniting after all these years. And the one thing that happens when she sees him, every time that she sees him, is that moment. She wants nothing else but to be with Guts, the man that she loves, but she can't even try because of what Griffith has done to her. What Griffith has done to the world. There is a little bit of a moment when the Moonlight Child returns and the two of them go to him for support, looking like a family. And while it takes her a minute, Casca does begin to try and still move on past the horrible things that have happened to her. Hell, everyone on the boat begins feeling better. They begin training with different magics and different techniques, and a lot of the guys on the boat believe they could just stay here. Things really do feel like they're better again. Things feel so calm and serene, and you feel like, yeah, Guts, though it's taken so long, really has found this nice group, this nice family. And it just feels so rewarding after all this hardships and monster fighting and horrible events that have happened to this man throughout the entirety of his life. He finally sits down, looks at the moon, and feels peace. Oh, God, I'm at this part, aren't I? Oh, God. In this wonderful moment, we see the Moonlight Child finally having a real moment of peace. And it is in this moment that the Moonlight Child quickly shifts back into its other form. Guts and Casca's child shares a body with Griffith. But it's in this moment that our two main characters that had once known exactly what they wanted to do, to be with each other, to achieve each other's dream, now finally meet once again. In this moment of peace, the two of them meet not on a battlefield, but in this peaceful landscape. They meet staring into each other's eyes, finally as equals. Two people that have believed that they have found what they've been looking for this whole time. Though the arc would continue due to the fact that Miura had been working with various other people throughout the last couple of years, and we are at the point where Guts and friends made their way back to the boat as Elfheim collapsed, dark spirits summoned by Griffith's very presence, meeting up with the Kushan soldiers and Rickert, and are currently in the Kushan capital, Guts continuing to try and control his powers, and Griffith trying to continue to control his people. Those parts would not be written by Miura. Though the basis of the story more than likely has been written out, he himself has not continued to write it. It would be in this last moment of the big Griffith reveal that Kento Miura would pass away. Frankly, it does feel weird to feel sad about a man I've never met in my life. Hell, I don't even feel this sad about people who have been in more things that I've seen or that I've interacted with. But the fact is, Kentaro Miura is not just the writer of Berserk. For as great as Berserk is, it will continue. The very man who basically trained with him in school is writing it for him now. Koji Mori will absolutely be the right man to help Berserk eventually find its conclusion. And while I don't know when that will be, I know eventually it will. It just sucks that the very man that started it won't ever see it. I feel in ways I relate to this. As a writer who wants to make so many things, the idea of not seeing the end of my series come to fruition just hits me in a certain way. But more importantly, it's the fact that Miura was a great person. He's a great man who helped so many people and inspired so many people. Again, I mentioned earlier on in the video that Berserk has inspired so many pieces of art everywhere, not just in Japan or America, but around the world. When Miura passed away, it was felt everywhere. Every single place that you could feel the inspiration of Miura tributed him after his passing, and you could feel that things had shifted after that. Things felt empty for a bit, but not forever, for that's sort of the point of Berserk. As we go through Berserk, we can really figure out that Berserk isn't just about a big man with a big sword fighting demons. It's about fighting one's own demons. It's about learning and growing and changing. It's about, despite the fact that one could be in such horrible places, that they could eventually find something good. That despite everything horrible that's happened to them or that they've caused, there's always a light on the other side. That there's always something waiting for you. A newfound family after the one that you have had is gone. Whatever the situation might be, Berserk really shows that despite the horrific imagery that often comes about in the series, that there's always something more beautiful and more majestic out there, and all it takes is the right mindset. All it takes is trying to continue on in the right way, not fall down this darker path, to not take whatever advantage is given to you and use it up to the point that it is dry. To not use the horrible things that have happened to you to turn yourself horrible, and to not give in to temptations and to anger and to hatred, but to try and fight against that, and to try and do and be your best. And that's what I feel Kentaro Miura as a person and as a writer emphasized in everything he made. Not just Berserk, but in every piece of art that he had created. Whether it be everything he's drawn or everything he's written. It sucks to see Kentaro Miura pass, but it's clear that he left this legacy that will never be forgotten. I'm not a religious man, but I do hope and believe that in the future, whatever stories I personally don't create and finish and put out will be finished, and I will be able to see what's out there from wherever I'll be. And even if they don't, that's fine, because I know whatever I will create soon before my death, which will be hopefully a long time from now, and whatever will be inspired by the things that I put out there, I will be seeing. Even if it'll be subtle and it'll be here and there, I know that the most important thing that we have in life is what we leave it with the messages that we leave and the kind of people that we were, regardless of our mistakes and the pasts that we have had. It is what we leave the world with and what we attempt to do with the rest of our lives after the problems that we have either have been placed upon us or that we may have placed upon other people. That even if someone did believe that they were born into a horrific, cold, soulless world without the idea of love or care, that eventually that person will find what that means. That there is good in this world. That despite everything that might happen bad to these people, there is peace and serenity out there. There is that light at the end of the tunnel. So all of that is my experience with Berserk. Me going through the stories here and there, my opinions about it all. And I hope you enjoyed it. I've been the Movie-a-thoner. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and leave a comment about what I may have missed about Berserk and how stupid I am, and you know how it is about comments. But more importantly, leave about what else I should talk about in other videos, and most importantly, make sure you leave a little subscribe down there to make sure you check out all my other stuff I'll be doing in the future. And of course, stay good, stay safe, don't be an asshole.